Well, Rick says we're on, but I don't see us on the internet. Are you sure we're on the internet, Rick?
Yeah.
Are we on the Living Stones channel or are we on my channel?
We're on your channel. We're good.
Are we? I don't see us on the internet. So I'm going here to live and I don't see us. So I'm going to have to take your word for it, Rick.
Okay. No, we're good. I'm watching it.
I did all this just to get Rick on the internet. Rick actually has a super secret channel on the internet where you can watch him ride his new motorcycle. So
shh.
Rick likes to stay below the radar or away from the radar, especially when he's riding.
Does he have a Patreon? Does
Rick have a Patreon?
No Patreon.
Well, welcome. If in fact we are on the internet, which I can't seem to verify. Oh, there we are. Now
you are online. I can see you on my channel.
Oh,
you are online.
You can see me on your channel? I'm on your channel
Not
too?
my channel. Not my channel. On my YouTube. On my app. Gosh.
Ooh, we got Andrea on too.
Now I don't even want to speak up anymore. Why do I even say things?
Oh, come on, Andrea. Sure you do. We got Andrea and Chad and Rick all voiced on the channel this morning. Well, thank you all for joining the weekly Bridges of Meaning Discord. Rick, should we stop early today just so you can make your meeting? Okay, we'll stop 15 minutes early. Is that good? Or a half hour? 15 minutes is good? Okay. We're going to go to 11:45 because Rick has an obligation for his day job. Maybe if Rick starts a Patreon, then he can give up his day job. How about that, Rick? What do you think? You think you'll make enough on a Patreon with your little motorcycle videos to give up your day job? Now everybody's going to be hunting for Rick's motorcycle videos. It's going to be really hard to find them. Rick knows how to stay below the radar. So, all right. I guess we should get after this question and answer. Question and answer stuff. I was gone last week. I was up in Salt Lake City for I'm a synodical deputy. That sounds so cool and important. Like I'd have a badge and a gun, but all I just make sure is that things run decently in good order and they don't break any synodical rules. So that doesn't sound anywhere as fun as high noon, but I went to Salt Lake City and did a meeting, and that was fun. It's good to get away. But now I'm back, and Justice for Portland. A couple of months, I asked if there's a symbolic relationship between a great high priest from outside the line of Levi and Protestant clergy from outside of the line of apostolic succession. You said the question, though profound and possibly revelatory, required you to ponder it in your heart before you could answer. So did I ponder? It's kind of like asking, did I see that video with Andrea and Mark about intimacy? I thought about it a few times, actually, the intimacy video. I didn't think about this, but now that you mention it, I you're just help turn the wheel a little bit more, and it prompts in me thoughts about apostolic succession, because there is something there, but I'm not ready to sort of. So this Sunday's to sort of, I know there's a lot of people cheering. I mean, Hank wants me to go Roman Catholic, and a bunch of you want me to go Orthodox, and if the Christian Reformed Church is no more, or Living Stones is no more, and PVK becomes a free agent, who's gonna recruit them? The Nigerian Anglicans, made an offer, no dollars behind it, but said, "Oh, you'd be great in our denomination." But even though I think the Nigerian Anglicans would be a very fun denomination to be a part of. The apostolic succession thing is very interesting. I'm this week preaching on Jesus washing the disciples' feet. And part of what's lovely about preaching and at least spending some of the year in some lectionary environment. See, I don't think I could be Orthodox because I'm just too darn Protestant. I've been for so long. But so I'm dealing with John 13, and because we had our men's group and we talked a lot about Judas in our men's group, that got me thinking about Judas. And then I never really paid much attention to all of the Judas chat in John 13. And so there's this weird thing about Judas and Peter. And now both of these, if you talk about apostolic succession, both of these are chosen by Jesus. Boy, this is so Peugeot-y, and I know that Peugeot would have thoughts about this. And, maybe next time I talk to Peugeot, I'll ask him, what's the deal with the Peter-Judas thing? Because Peter and Judas are sort of like Cain and Abel, aren't they? And they both don't get Jesus. Judas betrays Jesus. And I mean, the amount of, in the Gospels, the amount of the gospel writers really don't like Judas. Well, that's totally understandable given exactly what Judas does. So in my sermon, the rough draft that will come out Saturday morning as usual, you might look for that, because the whole Judas thing is very interesting, and the way Satan figures into both the talk about Judas and the temptations, and when First Peter gives this amazing profession of faith that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus says, okay, well, here's the plan. And Peter's like, I'll stand against that plan. And so Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. And so this gets into this question about Satan as well. And so if you want to sort of figure out Satan, Peter, and Judas and how they relate to each other, it's all in the Gospels. And, Satan goes into Judas. Satan is, and so then the Gospels are not clear on Judas's motivation. They're clear on some of Judas's motivation, like he loved money, and so that's in the Gospel of John. But I don't think I don't think it was just about money, the betrayal. That's too shallow for a guy who had, I'm sure Judas at one point was a true believer, but the question is, a true believer in what? Well, how does this have to do with apostolic succession? Well, the whole idea behind apostolic succession is that the master chooses the disciple. Jesus chooses both Peter and Judas. So are there lines in apostolic succession that are Peter lines and lines that are Judas lines? I've never thought anything about this. I'm sure Catholic or Orthodox scholars have. So, and what about the Protestants? I mean, the whole idea behind Protestantism is that it's very Pauline, which will, I don't know how Jacob will respond to that, but Protestantism is very Pauline in that Jesus calls Paul from the cloud. I mean, unlike Peter, unlike Judas, Paul's discipleship is very interesting. And, Paul was in some ways subject to skepticism and scorn by virtue of this, but eventually Paul was clearly embraced by the church. And then so much of Pauline material is formative in terms of Christian theology. So there's Justice from Portland. That's a darn good question. And, you're really smart. I mean, so many people want to colonize, like Russia tries to colonize Ukraine, and all you get from that is resistance. And this is the power of the West. It's the subtle way of colonizing. It's wooing the heart. It's attracting the mind. It's flirting with the imagination. And so there you go, Justice from Portland. Very, very good colonizing there in terms of continuing to plant this little seed in my brain to get an answer to your question. So you got more answer this week than you did the time before. So good job, Justice from Portland. Good colonizing. That's skillful. All right, Christian Golden from Pine Bush, New York. There are reports of a Ukrainian fighter called the Ghost of Kiev for Grim Grizz. I wrote a Substack this morning on nostalgia. Oh, here's Rick. ABC, $5. What's that, Rick?
I couldn't pronounce it either. I was like,
Begom 3 Orthodox with big K. All right, thank you. Thanks for getting Rick out of his chair, getting the old cardiovascular system pumping. Rick's not getting any younger, All right, back to the Ghost of Kiev, or Kiev for Grim Grizz, because of nostalgia. And read the Substack on nostalgia I wrote this morning. I should probably make a video on that. I had that thought, sort of re-estimating the importance of nostalgia. And a big part of that Substack, Rick might want to look it up, because Rick introduces me to a lot of things cultural. And one of the things he introduced me to was the member berries. And there's a great YouTube video with all the member berry scenes from South Park, and it's genius. It is total genius. The member berries are. So anyway, reports of a Ukrainian fighter called the Ghost of Kiev. Many people are sharing these reports as beacons of hope and evidence of Ukrainian strength and courage. Nearly immediately following these reports, people began criticizing these reports, and some Twitter accounts seem to be dedicated to all of their posts of fact-checking these apparent false reports of the Ghost of Kiev. The Protestants among us, fact-checking. Something about this fact-checking fury seems more harmful than the lies they are fact-checking. When does a myth become more truth than a lie? Something seems more true about the mythical Ghost of Kiev than the posts by the fact checkers. You're very much onto something, Christian, and this has a lot to do with everything that's going on in terms of the tensions within this little corner of the internet, because it is modernist and Protestant in some ways to demand that everything be true at the physical level. And if it is not true at the physical level, we're going to reject it. Now, there's something good about that, because that which is most true is true at all levels. So the video I posted this morning of the John Bear Sam conversation, which was excellent. I know Anselman doesn't think a lot of John Bear, but don't give up, Anselman. See, Anselman won't give up. That's part of the beauty of Anselman. He's down for a fight, and he's not going to give up. And I love people like that. Whether I agree or disagree, you stick to your guns, and because that we got a little weird noise coming through here, Rick. What is that? Is that you?
Hey, Joe, could you mute yourself?
Oh, so okay, there it is. Thanks. So when you watch Peugeot and Richard Rowland do their universal history thing, that's connected to this. Because all of these stories about Alexander the Great coming to Jerusalem, all the hagiographies, the Orthodox quite clearly have a love for this and a way of incorporating it, as does and did the Catholics. But of course, the Catholics passed through something that the Orthodox didn't or haven't yet. And this is why I always say there's a point made by Protestantism which is really important. And that point, even though Protestantism itself is all over the map, that point has to do with this issue that the most real things are real at every level. Now, there can be things that are real at the physical level, but less real than things, not less real. See, it's these ways of comparing, it's this grammar that make it difficult to talk about, because there's a reality to universal history that is credible and stands on its own apart from the physical history. And this is part of what Peterson points to when Peterson says a novel is in some ways more real than a physical description. He doesn't use those words, but that's really what he's talking about. And it's very difficult for us to fully get our minds around this reality. So this is sort of what legends are made of. And when I say it that way, say, oh, the Ghost of Kiev, that's a legend. And if in fact I watched Peugeot's, those of you who follow me on Twitter know that I watched Peugeot's video about Ukraine this morning. Really enjoyed it, because Peugeot hit a bunch of things that I had sort of been feeling too, although I was a little quicker to make some commentary on some things. But we don't know what's going on. Everything that we know about this war is filtered, and heavily filtered. So a good bit of caution is in order. First thing. So let's say that the Ghost of Kiev is a legend. Well, what's a legend? Generally speaking, a legend is a tall tale. That's a bit of Americana. It's a story that's probably based on some physical events and some physical human characters that gets embroidered. We'll use that language. And it gets magnified. And basically it gets fed the kind of stuff that makes up universal history. And it's important, and we need it, and we love it. But it's a legend. And so part of the Protestant dispute and our journey into Protestantism was the question, well, is Jesus' resurrection a legend? And so one of the things that Jordan Peterson did when he talks about the resurrection, if let's imagine, and this is a distortion, of course, but we'll go with it. Let's imagine that this is the physical story beneath the legend, and the legend is this whole thing. And the legend will probably distort elements of the physical story in order for the legend to function. Jordan Peterson, in terms of the resurrection, speaking psychologically, is comfortable to talk up here. And so then when he has this conversation with Peugeot sort of brings him down here and starts to drill into this, and that's when Peterson gets nervous. Because as a scientist or a modernist or a modern historian, you want to deal with this part down here, and you're skeptical about this part up here. Even though part of what's being exposed now that modernity is receding is both the necessity of this part up here and the value of this part up here, and the fact that we actually see this part down here through that part up there. And the Ghost of Kiev, if in fact it is a legend, there's probably a Ukrainian fighter pilot that's been better than most, that's had some success against the Russians. And maybe The Ghost of Kiev is a compilation of a few different fighter pilots. We don't know. But there's a truth about the legend that the individual instances contribute to, but don't adequately embody. And that's the function of a legend, especially when it comes to our principalities. And this has everything to do with storytelling. So the Critical Drinker this morning released a new video on why movies suck. And it's just pure Critical Drinker. But he makes a lot of good points he compares the cartoon Mulan, which I really enjoyed. My kids watched that growing up, and I loved that story. Mulan I love that little cartoon. And I've never seen the live action one because for the most part, I've seen what they've been doing with those, and it's like, no, you're missing the point. And the Critical Drinker does a nice job of showing what points they're missing. Oh, Wendy for $20. Thank you for being you. Thank you, Wendy. That's delightful. That's see, only I gotta get my face out of the camera because the Sony does such a good job. Only on the PVK Q&A can your super chats be actually touched by Rick, and you'll actually get an original Rick piece of art. So there we go. That's genius marketing, Vanderclay. You're gonna get all kinds of crazy super chats, and Rick's gonna be drawing up a storm over there. Draw this, Rick. 1 week Job was making him walk over every 5 minutes, like ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching for Google and me. So there's this. So a legend is really important for us because. So I just released a little video both on my Vanderclips channel. I didn't check to make sure it went through, and then on Twitter of The Guardian had a nice little piece about Ukrainian reservists. And it had a nice little segment of basically a ballad singer using an ancient Cossack instrument, singing an ancient Cossack song. And the narrator of the video is saying how, the spirit, the spirit fills us, the spirit of their ancestors, of the Cossacks, to resist the Russians. And if you listen to the rest is history, you'll learn a little bit about the Cossacks and Ukraine and Russia and the history and all of that. So those spirits live on, and legends are very spiritual because they embody the spirits get carried on through the legend. It's sort of like there are certain people, when they try to tell a story, they don't know how and they can't do it, and they can even ruin a great story, just like you ruin a good joke. And there are people who can tell a great story and can deliver a great joke. And that's sort of the difference. So I think your instincts are exactly right here, Golden, that what's happening here is far bigger than who's the hero. So Warren Mills, who organized my trip to Australia, now going on 3 years ago, his second book that he wrote about what's good about the Golden Rule. The first book that he wrote that wasn't published, and he's still trying to get it published, is a book about the father of drag racing. Because when Warren was a kid in 1950s Australia, Big Daddy Don Garlits was his hero. And so he's written a book about it, and he's reworking the book, and he wants to get it published about Big Daddy Don Garlits. And so when Warren was a kid in Australia, they were kind of peeved at the British because they felt that the British had abandoned Australia during the Second World War, and the Americans came to their aid. And so little Warren Mills was, I wonder if Warren will listen to this. Little Warren Mills was just fascinated with California, and he was a petrol head. That's how he introduced himself to me when I met him. Of course, petrol is the British way of saying gasoline. He was a petrol head, and he'd monkey with engines, and he worked his career in the automotive industry, and he built a race car himself. And I mean, he's just that kind of guy, loves doing that. And then his retirement started writing books, which is really a fascinating thing. A lot of people don't have that kind of bandwidth to sort of make the jump from being, working in the automotive industry with nuts and bolts and your hands and grease and everything to writing books. But he finally, as later in life, got a chance to go to America to meet Big Daddy Don Garlitz. And, there's this saying, which is also true, don't meet your heroes. Well, why? Well, they'll disappoint you. And that could be, if to the degree that whatever distortion field YouTube is creating, some of you someday might want to meet me, and you might walk away disappointed. They'll say, well, he's taller than I thought he was, but he didn't give me the attention, or he didn't live up to my expectations, or because in some ways PVK is a legend, a little legend, but there's some legendariness about me too. It's just by virtue of the medium and storytelling and how this medium works. So, but the legend is an important thing. And there's sort of a demythologizing modern Protestantism that wants to just sweep the legend away. And so fundamentalism basically tries to take the legend and make the physical layer fit the legend. And that's not a bad desire. And sometimes that Protestant fundamentalism is a corrective against the inherent skepticism. But sometimes the legend should just be kept as a legend, and that's okay. But, and this is part of the point of fundamentalism, that it makes imperfectly, and is that the physical layer remains important. And we know that because movies that are based on a true story are better because they're based on a true story, and people who know the story well at different layers will critique the movie and be involved in all that. And so this is a real thing. And all of these big world events that we're going through, COVID, the Ukraine war, everything around us are lessons in sense making if you pay attention to them. And you can grow in wisdom by paying attention. One of the big things I learned from Peterson was that when he talked about attention, you might not be the smartest person in the world. And I don't mean that I'm not the smartest person in the world. I mean, I don't even know what my IQ is, and frankly, I don't even care. But I'm not an idiot. I'm not low in intelligence. I'm not genius level. I'm maybe better than average in intelligence, but I'm not the smartest person in the world. But even if you're not very smart, if you pay attention, you can gain wisdom. And I have known many people who are not very intelligent, who pay attention and become wise. So if you're not very intelligent, don't let that discourage you. Make up for your lack of intelligence with wisdom gained through attention. Because in the long run, you'll outcompete the very smart. Because attention is powerful. And so don't dismiss legend. And that's what part of the reason I've been fascinated by Peugeot and Roland's universal history. Because universal history includes legend. And, well, I'm going to avoid. Yeah, I'll leave it there. So it's a good question. Are powers and principalities immortal? Yes, in the sense that they are not subject to decay. They are upper register. Now, will they, in fact? I would say they are potentially. They are, in fact, immortal, because mortal basically means lower register, subject to decay, and immortal means upper register, not subject to decay. Will they, in fact, live forever? Not necessarily. If they are evil, they won't. If they are good, they will. So I've given you some long answers. I've given you some short answers. There's a short answer. I hear something out there. I think Rick's going to go check it out. It's a live place today at Living Stones. We've had all kinds of stuff in the last few days with homeless peeps and this and that. So if you're curious about that, I'm not going to recommend that. Oh, another super chat. ABC. Read the comment on YouTube. Hopefully Peugeot, Vanderklee, and Vervaeke, and hopefully Marceau can disappoint me all at the same time one day. It might happen. Do I have a pencil sharpener? No. There's a coffee cup in that next room full of pens and pencils. So, all right. Is it wrong for a Christian to volunteer for the military? I'm not a pacifist, and so I say no. That is not wrong. I think a Christian can be a soldier. If you're a pacifist, that gets more tricky. And so there's, one of the things that the United States incorporated is the status of conscientious objector. And conscientious objectors, there's a really good film about a conscientious objector who saves all sorts of soldiers. He was a medic, didn't carry a gun. Chaplains don't carry guns. Chaplains are in the military. So, yeah, I believe you can be a Christian and volunteer for the military. I believe that when I'm studying the book of Romans. It'll be a few years before I get to Romans 12, the rate I'm going. That's in Sunday school class, but that's okay. I think Romans 13, where the Apostle Paul recognizes that God has there is a place for the state. And a legitimate power of the state is the sword. But it is a lesser power than the power wielded by Christ, who now Christ can wield a sword. Christ can wield a sword, but that there's a lot of, the Gospels get into that, and I talk about that a lot in my sermons. So I know for a bunch of you, my sermons are sort of incidental because maybe you're not a Christian or you don't believe or anything like that, but they're a big deal to me. And maybe you think that's weirdness, but they might not seem on topic according to some of the topics that you're interested in, but there's a lot that's in there, and especially in the Sunday school class. So I'm glad Sunday school class is going again, and that's a high Sunday school hour for me is a high point of my week. That's such a fun context. And if I could do these Q&As live, I would, because it would be so much fun to be in a room with you all and do these questions and answers. So, yeah, Christians can volunteer for the military, in my opinion. Is a love of a country something that is of the spirit or of the flesh? You've got to be careful saying of the spirit is good and of the flesh is bad. God's flesh, the word flesh, sarx in Greek, is very complex. There are times when the Apostle Paul means it fairly synonymously with a certain sort of sin, but there are other times when flesh is not sinful at all. So that's a super complex term. Now, I noticed you didn't capitalize spirit in your question. So there are many different spirits. And so now if you say of the Holy Spirit, that's different than just spiritual or a spirit. And, I was thinking about this morning. There are good spirits and bad spirits and better spirits and worse spirits. And, there's spirits all over the place. And Karen Wong sent me a very interesting video that I have yet to digest. And, well, Andrea and Mark feel her pain. So there's a lot of videos out there that why I watch what I watch, I have no idea. It's not that I have no idea, but it's complicated. Anyway, love of country is not a bad thing. I think if you are American, you should love your country because those are your neighbors. And your country is in a sense, a principality of your neighbors. And so you have a duty to love them. So if you're an American, you should love your country. If you're a Brit, you should love your country. If you're a Russian, you should love your country. It doesn't mean that you should necessarily support and endorse everything that your country does. I'm an American, and I certainly don't support or encourage everything that my country does. I can be critical of my country, but we are critical of things we love often. So there's a real shallow, facile simplicity about endorsement and loving today. It's so much of a nuanced, complex things, and any parent should know that. Part of what this morning, I heard some raised voices coming from outside the home. I was alone in the home, and whenever you hear that, you kind of get up and investigate. Is it someone on drugs? Is it someone with mental illness that's freaking out in the street? Is it someone in trouble? And so I got up and opened the door to look and to hear, and it was someone having a domestic dispute. It wasn't violent. There were no blows, but there were words in anger, and I was sad because I know what that's like. And I feel for those two people. Now, why are they so angry? It's because they love each other. And one disappointed the other, or maybe they're both disappointing each other, and they can't figure it out. There's flesh and spirit all bound up into that. And our love of our country is in some ways like that. Because your country is the instantiation, is the principality of your neighbors, out to and including a certain boundary that is both geographical but also spiritual and temporal and all of those things. And so it's good to love your country. And, just like couples fight, countries fight. So it's not a bad thing to love your country. And it's an honorable thing to serve in its military, in my opinion. And if it is of the flesh, should it be avoided or disregarded? No, so your country is part flesh and part spirit because it's human. It's also extended, and so it's both and to a big degree. And it's historical. And, again, Peugeot is the guy who can map out all of these things in really clever ways, but that's the way it is. And in this age, we are full of sin. And even some of your Christian heroes can get things terribly wrong. And some of your national heroes can get things terribly wrong. So, yeah, it's a good thing to love and serve your country. It's an honorable thing to die for your country, because greater love has no one than to die for a friend. And your countryman or countrywoman should in some ways be a friend. So that's my take on it. Pacifists might have a different take, but I'm not here to give pacifist theology. How to implement the exhortation of 1 Timothy 6:20-21. I ask because I can't help but despair at the pattern of denominational loyalty manifestations and the tendency to idolize even the holy lower things. You're going to make me open my Logos Bible study software, aren't you? 1 Timothy 6:20-21. Sorry to not have the Bible memorized, but you get the PVK that you got, not the one that you prefer. 6. All right. Oh, it's the end of the letter. Timothy, guard what has been entrusted to you. Avoid the profane chatter and contradictions of what is falsely called knowledge. By professing it, some have missed the mark as regards to the faith. Grace be with you. Despair at the pattern of denominational loyalty manifestations and the tendency to idolize even the holy lower things. Paul and Barnabas couldn't make it work. I was listening. So of course the Sam conversation with John Bear. I mean, a bunch of you. This is my point about colonizing slow. You should have a slow cooker colonization. Part of the reason the West is winning the war in Ukraine. Now the Ukrainians are winning because of their sacrifice and courage and spirit. But part of the reason the West is winning is because of the slow cooker colonization. And so, a long time ago, everyone's like, oh, John Bear. And then Sam had John Bear on. It's like, oh, so I watch a few minutes of it. And, people aren't just bags of words. They're personalities. And looked at John Bear and listened to him. I thought, oh, I like him. I like the way he talks. I like the way he thinks. And doesn't mean that everything he says is right. It's just I like the way he talks. I like the way he thinks. And I listened to it, and it sent me down a rabbit trail of finding some other John Bear content and yada, 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 yada. Where was I going with that? Oh, I distract myself. It's terrible. So people are fans of John Bear. That's totally fine. Be a fan. It's a cool thing. And maybe because of John Bear, some people want to become Orthodox. Okay, that's cool. People, I would rather have someone take a liking to someone like John Bear and decide to be orthodoxy than to decide to be Orthodox and pursue that in sort of a serious way than just always watch YouTube videos and never pursue actually going to any church. Act, embody, listen to Grim Grizz's, at least some of his admonitions. But if you listen to John Bear, I was listening to one of the things and listening about all the squabbles of the church fathers. Martin Luther too. Martin Luther, says the most ghastly things about others. And just saying difficult things is not necessarily evil. Jesus does it. But one of the things I appreciated about Peugeot's video about the Ukraine conflict is he began by saying, Orthodox Christians are killing each other. Yeah, that we should pause right there, because we're so accustomed to it, and Christians have been doing it for so long. We think nothing of it, but we should pause there and think about that. And one of the interesting things about this conflict in Ukraine is that the church layer has not gone unnoticed. Justin Brierley had a video on it. Secular media has picked up on it to a degree. So the Christians are people too, and that means Christians are sinners too. And it's really hard for us to figure out how to deal with each other in a godly way. So, in the YouTube comments, in the Twitters, we love some people and we hate some people, and we don't treat people some well. And I certainly have done that too. But, in my denominational life, I am friends with people on both sides. In fact, I am good friends with people on both sides. I am friends with same-sex attracted people in the Christian Reformed Church that are longing, angry, furious that the Christian Reformed Church won't affirm in the way they think it should. And I'm good friends with people who basically say, if the denomination takes one more step in that direction, I'm gone. And I'm friends with people who have left. And I'm going to Synod, and I wanted to go to Synod. I don't know at what level, but my story and the story of the denomination, maybe the end of it, is going to intersect this summer in June. How, I don't know, but we'll see. Love one another, all the way up to and including your enemies. And that includes your church enemies. And I know they tick you off. So yesterday when I got to church, there was a full-blown encampment. There's a full-blown encampment, and I was furious because it's like I actually enjoy ministering to the homeless. I really do. I love hearing their stories. I like walking with them. I hope to lend them my agency so they can do better than what they're doing when they're sleeping outside on the hard concrete, doing drugs and watching videos on their cell phones. I'd love to be part of their stories of redemption. I welcome that. But the amount of trash, the amount of garbage, the amount of feces, the amount of disruption, I can't handle all of that too. And so somebody asked one week, do I ever lose my temper? Yeah, of course I lose my temper. So that encampment was over there, and I was ready to rip someone a new one, and nobody was in it. So took out my knife and I start cutting the things down, and they had this fire going, and it's like, you have a fight. Don't make me laugh, Rick. Rick's doing stuff in the camera. And so I cut down the tarp, and I threw a pillow on the fire, and of course the pillow was made of foam rubber. So before I knew it, I had this great big black toxic smoke going up, and then I was like, well, maybe that's not a good idea. And then I made sure that the fire didn't spread, and I start walking back to my office thinking about my next strategy, and then I see the guy come back to it. And so I told him, I said, if there's anything there you want, you better take it now, because I'm going to burn the lot of it. They says, oh, there's a woman who's got her stuff here too. I said, you go find her and tell her, get her stuff out of there, because what you leave behind, I'm going to get rid of. I can't. There is so much garbage around this place. And, the church leadership is like, this doesn't help us. This doesn't help us welcome people into church and feel comfortable and be hospitable, having piles of homeless garbage. And so, Lord willing, we're going to, me and Rick and Roger and Jared and maybe Scott and any other volunteers out there, we're going to build a fence. And I hate building a fence, because that's going to cut off an area of ministry that I have valued. But life is like that. And there's a place for anger. I was talking to a friend yesterday, and he said, there's a time to build up and a time to tear down, and we seem to be in a tearing down season. So, yeah. Paul's admonition to Timothy is important. Guard what has been entrusted to you. Avoid the profane chatter and contradictions of what is falsely called knowledge. By professing it, some have missed the mark as regards the faith. Yeah, I totally believe that. It's good wisdom given from a veteran to a young pastor, Paul to Timothy. So, this is what life is made of in this age. Runaway. Sorry for the long question this time. I've been a big fan of Peugeot for a long time, and I think I finally have a solid criticism of his take. Well, there you go. Let's use a biblical example. The angel appeared in the tomb. Peugeot would say that this is a moment where heaven and earth meet. American fundamentalists would just say a being with wings appeared. This is where I actually agree more with the way fundamentalism in a way. No one will address the maybe childish yet pressing question on my mind, which is, what did it actually look like? Enoch is said to have walked with God. What is actually happening there? People say if you go back with a video camera, it would look different. But I find that to be a problem. Peugeot would say that these stories are the best way to describe something. However, it feels disappointing sometimes. This gets into the question, Christian Golden's question. And there's an issue of representation. Even though, so I was thinking about, so Critical Drinkle released a video this morning, which was fun. And then Burn Powers recommended another video by why Hollywood movies are crap, and that sent me down a little rabbit trail this morning. Watched a couple of the little videos by a guy, and it was cool. But it got me again thinking about the medium of film. And by film now we mean not just stuff on this plastic celluloid, but stuff on Netflix and all of what film is. Film is this multi-layered art form that not only has image, paintings have image, but film has image and characters and music and all of the elements that goes into film. And it's a powerful art form. Now, you might think that it displaces painting, but it doesn't. You might think that it displaces storytelling, but it doesn't. You might think that it displaces written literature, but it doesn't. And so what we see in this, even though film is in some ways built on all of those other art forms, music, another powerful art form. So movies are so powerful. Just watch a movie without music sometime. Watch a movie without sound. You can turn on the subtitles. It's a powerful art form because it's so integrated of so many other art forms. But the underlying art forms continue to have their power. They're not simply subsumed by film. They continue to stand outside of it. And I think there's a lesson there about technology, because newspapers haven't exactly gone away, but they've been displaced and disrupted. But they still have their place. It's just a smaller place because other things have taken other pieces. So my part of the reason, why isn't Vanderklay Orthodox? Why isn't Vanderklay Catholic? Because the Protestants had a point. And they didn't always do perfectly with their point, but they had a point, and the point remains. And actually, Catholics and Orthodox, as they continue to tweak their own traditions, accommodate the point. Catholics have been doing that for a very long time. Many of the new Orthodox were Protestants, so maybe they're taking all of the points and getting beyond it and making progress. Maybe. I mean, that's part of what we're all doing together with this. So I'd agree with you, Runaway, that you've got a point. Now, when we start talking about a video camera, we have to be careful, because if you're actually holding a camera, and it can be a still camera, still cameras haven't gone away. There's a really cool project on the way from the Discord server that will make the point that still cameras haven't gone away. Poetry hasn't gone away. Written text hasn't gone away. But even if you're holding a movie camera, you are selecting what to see. And that frame, and I use that word expansively, that frame is a part of the medium. It's an inherent limitation that affords perspective and power, but remains a limitation. And a story through text doesn't exactly have that limitation. What fundamentalism got right was the physical layer matters, and the most real things are real at all the layers. Where fundamentalism overreaches is to imagine that that layer displaces the other layers. So an angel is more than what meets the eye, just like each one of us is. Let's say you and I meet, so I'm going to be in Grand Rapids in June, and I'm hopefully going to get a chance to meet with some of you people, and I'm going to see you and you're going to see me. Now, you've been seeing me through a video camera. I'm in this little frame. Often when people start at the church, a very common thing they ask for is, they're a little sheepish when they ask it, because as Rick knows, to me and Rick, it's not that big of a deal where I record these little videos. And in fact, Rick would really love it if we would finally get around to making a studio where our production values could be better. But people will often say, can I see where you make the videos? Before I was doing videos, I was telling a lot of homeless stories on Facebook. I stopped for some reasons, and I'm doing it on Twitter now more. But people would stop by the church and say, can I see it? Can I see the foundation of the Lord? Well, Rick rolls his eyes because he's like, you better be prepared to hold your nose because you don't smell it when you see it on Facebook or Twitter. And I'll tell you, a lot of times when I walk into my office, it does not smell good because someone has just used it as a toilet. So if you like the smell of urine, you'll love the foundation of the Lord. So all of these mediums both represent and also distort. And so if you understand the limitations and the potentiality of these mediums, you can have a better understanding for their proper place. When we sort of imaginatively go back to stories of the Bible with a video camera, we're doing something that is the cause of all of the disappointment we have when we see people make movies about Jesus. Because they're trying to translate between media. And if you think translating from Greek to English or Hebrew to English or Greek to Latin to English is difficult, try translating textual story to film. There's even way more reality in there. So, I'm not saying what you're pushing on is worth a ton more reflection. And just like with everything we say, we're a little bit right and we're a little bit wrong. And Peugeot will be right and wrong about the things that he's saying. And so if you meet me, you will see me, and your knowledge of me will be immediately expanded by our physical interaction. But that's just the beginning. The longer we talk, the more it'll be expanded. And then if you say, oh, Paul, let me see where you record your videos, and you step into my terribly dirty office. Oh, wow, there's a lot more context there. And. So fundamentalists had a point, and you got to respect that point. But with every point maker, there are also limitations, and the limitations are part of the picture. So, in real life politic, read on YouTube. What, another thing? This is my effort to colonize your mind. Well, wait till the end of the question. So, yeah. And this is something I think about all the time. Because preaching is one of those media. And, I integrated right away. I integrated PowerPoint with images and text into preaching. And I'm still glad that I did that. And so then when I did a YouTube channel, I did my channel in a way that I could continue to do that. But if you take, let's say, a story about your life, part of the reason I really loved that Sam Bear conversation was the point about apocalypse. Think about an important event in your life. Think about what you thought you knew about it when it happened. Think about what you thought you knew about it a year after. Think about what you think you know about it now. Apocalypse is an unveiling. Probably throughout your life, that event has been unveiled multiple times. And if you go back, so when my kids were little, we had a video camera, we took video around the house. Every now and then I'll pull out some of that video and look at it. Wow, it's revelatory. I see my younger self, and I know my younger self, and I see my sin. What do you mean by that? I mean, you're sitting there playing with your kids. Where's your sin? Well, I've had a lot of apocalypse since I was 35. And if I could go back and talk to my 35-year-old self, I'd have some things to say. Could my 35-year-old self hear it? Probably not. Because my life has been an unveiling. And so we sort of want to, oh gosh, I wish Adam and Eve had a video camera. I don't know that we want that. And it's akin to never meet your heroes. So it's a great question. The best questions can't be fully answered. And I would say probably some of the best answers don't really end when my lips stop moving. So I got to take a drink. Anybody in the chat room want to say anything?
Amen.
What do you think about samurais and bringing back the code of the samurai? We were talking
Don't
about
know
it a
enough
lot
about
in,
it. I have
chat
a very
earlier.
low resolution knowledge of it. It's chivalry, basically. It's Asian chivalry, to my understanding, but I'm sure that that's super low resolution.
Do you know a lot about chivalry? Because we talked about the chivalrous code as well.
European chivalry has a lot of layers to it. There's certainly shame and honor. There's certainly a male-female dimension to it, because the man is the agent of the Arenic lady in some ways. Yeah, I don't know. I think we hunger for that. Again, we hunger for the legend, because we can't live without the legend. Well, what did in real life want to say? This is my effort to colonize your mind. I would love to hear your commentary on Solzhenitsyn's Harvard address from 78. It's very pertinent to today's world events. The press at the time did not like it. Yeah, Solzhenitsyn wasn't easy to take. You know, there's a YouTube channel out there that tries to do really big history, and it basically divides the world up by roughly speaking, the religions. But now, of course, Christianity is multi-layered. You have the Catholic world, you have the Protestant world, and you have the Orthodox world. And Orthodoxy is different. It is. But there's resolution and all kinds of layers to these things. So, yeah, I'll see if I remember that. You never know. Jason Almond Tree. Is the division over John Mark in the book of Acts, where Paul and Barnabas split, an example of Protestantism? It's an example of human nature. Maybe that's a stretch, but it says that the contention became so sharp that they parted from one another. There's been a lot of schisms in the church before the Protestant schisms. Just read church history. Judaizers, Paul's relationship with the church at Corinth, Paul and Barnabas. There's a lot that goes into our divisions. It may seem like this happened within Protestant churches all the time and over petty things. You don't think Catholics fight? You don't think Orthodox fight? They're all people. Now, part of what happened with Protestantism was Protestantism arises about the same time as the nation state, and that relationship is not incidental. history is super complex. A big part of why Protestantism arose is because of the kinds of struggles between the Catholic Church and the continued evolution of kingdoms, empire, and then eventually nation states. You can take almost anything in this world. This is combinatorial explosiveness. You can take almost anything in this world and spend your entire life studying it and not get to the bottom. Mike L., you seem to use masculine and feminine power interchangeably with agentic and arenic power. Yeah, you also say many men employ arenic power and many women employ agentic power. Yeah. Is it really correct or helpful to gender these powers? What I'm doing is I am trying to explore through language things that I don't understand. It's sort of like when Peterson brings up a historic association between the feminine and the chaotic and the masculine and the ordered. All of us have masculine and feminine within. Masculine and feminine are two categories that we attempt to come to some understanding of deeper things in reality. So I was listening to, so one video that Byrne sent me to was, why do 99% of Hollywood movies suck? Something like that. And then there was a follow-up video on it, which I thought was more interesting than the first one, where the guy, the film critic or in the film industry, I don't know who exactly the guy was, but where he talked about this substitution of female for masculine characters. And the video begins with him pleading, please do not do this to Back to the Future. We don't need Mandy McFly. We don't need Mandy McFly's dad crushing on his future daughter. And right there, everyone's like, oh, that we couldn't make a movie about that. Critical Drinker made that point too, that you can't just take Marty McFly, make it Mandy McFly, and think that, oh, now we've what? Masculine and feminine are real. Sex differences are real. But sex differences in masculine and feminine aren't completely, they're not identical. So, and I was thinking about the fact that the Critical Drinker talks about this in the movie Thor Ragnarok, where this older sister of Thor and Loki appears and, beats them in a fist fight. And Critical Drinker says, part of what's going on here is that if you can't let men beat women, if you're going to have men and women fighting each other, it just looks bad to have the men beating up on women. Well, why does that look bad? And it doesn't look bad to have women beating up on men. Well, because generally, not always, and if you know anything about domestic violence, you know that there are domestic violence cases out there where women are beating on men, and men are not hitting back. There was a time for a while when there were a lot of football players in trouble for domestic violence. They were hitting their girlfriends, and some of these were on video. I watched a lot of those videos, and what I saw in many of those videos, the woman hit the man first. And then the man hit her back. But now, a lot of these football players were 200-plus pound, young, strong men who are constantly in physical training. and they were going out with 110, 15-pound skinny women. And so she hits him, doesn't do a thing to him. He hits her, she's in the hospital. So is hitting the same? So that Ragnarok movie, about a lot of the criticism is, hey, wait a minute, you've just basically taken a masculine character with masculine power and just slotted a woman into the character. That's dumb. And that second video, I actually thought of this would make the subject of a good video, a subject of a good commentary video, because that second video, and Peugeot has made this point again and again and again. You don't just slot a female character into what has been a male character and say progress. No, it's just dumb. It's lazy. You want to make a good movie? You don't think there isn't such a thing as feminine power? Well, how can we describe feminine power? Arenic is one way, but that by no means completely captures it, because there's male arenic power and there's female arenic power. What was the power of Queen Victoria? I mean, someone on Twitter was making some stupid comment about, well, it's toxic masculinity that starts all wars and empire, and if women ran the world, then Queen Victoria didn't run an empire. Cleopatra didn't rule, wasn't a strong woman. There's lots of strong women throughout history. Some of them were fierce warriors, sure, but they didn't win the way male fierce warriors necessarily won. And so this morning I was, making a tweet about this Ukrainian Cossack song, and when I was about to tweet, I didn't know if Cossack had two S's or one. You might say, well, that's just a little thing, and you have Google, yada yada yada. But in that moment, I remembered, you know what? You don't really show that you understand something unless you can wield it in a certain way. And the fact that Hollywood is just sort of substituting women in for men shows that this supposed female revolution has really been extremely masculine, and people have lost an understanding of feminine power and femininity and its power and its proper place and what it wields. And that's, in a sense, that could be one of the real casualties of a supposed feminine revolution. Is it hasn't been a feminine revolution. It's been a masculine revolution in which women have been duped into masculinity. So is there a mapping between arenic and agentic and masculine and feminine? I think so. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think so. And I think I have evidence for it. I think historically, mythologically, I think it holds water. But again, a father is arenic for a child growing up. The mother is also arenic. So there's a lot of fluidity in the world in these terms, because some men wield feminine power very well. Some women wield masculine power fairly well. But generally speaking, men are better at masculine and women are better at feminine. Oh, cancel him. What radical talk he's just given us. There's so much idiocy around. Is there something inherently good, correct or good, about men living in an agentic power and women living in arenic power? I don't know if that's the way to think about it. I am 6'4", 240 pounds. How many women do you know that are 6'4", 240 pounds? I'm sure you can find some out there, but most women I know are shorter than me and weigh less than me. And is that good? I don't know that we have to. Good with respect to what? Now, maybe there's a 25-year-old woman athlete who's 6'4", 240 pounds, and she's a beast in some sports arena, and she can kick my butt because she's young and healthy and in good shape. It's probably true. Does you say, well, she's masculine? Well, in a way. Can she not be feminine? Well, I'm sure she's feminine in other ways. You know, one of the interesting things about the Peterson conversation with his wife and his daughter was how much of Peterson's personality maps feminine and how much of his wife's personality maps masculine. That doesn't mean they're any less man and woman. It just means that we have these mappings. And as Peterson makes the point, you know, men and women are sort of like this. We're not like this. We're like this. And so in that Ukrainian video this morning, women were out there filling sandbags and women are out there with guns and they're participating in the army. But most of the women are leaving with the children out to Poland and Romania, rightly so. And the men are going the other way. Now, is it toxic femininity that if a man runs to Poland, he's a coward? Well, maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. It depends if he is a coward. Maybe he's actually better off helping the effort from Poland than from the Ukraine. I don't know. People are amazingly complex in that way. And the fact that we can't seem to have reasonable conversations or applications of this because suddenly these terms have gotten so tyrannical just seems, why are we being dumb with each other and unloving and uncaring and foolish? So, yeah, there's mappings. You know, in some ways, you know, femininity and chaos and masculinity and order, that's an old mapping. Is it limited? Absolutely. I'll tell you, in my life growing up, my mother brought order to that house. And my father went along with it. If my father had run the house, there would have been more chaos because he wasn't as good at order as my mother was. And we were very blessed because my mother brought order to that house. Well, she's woman, she's a feminine, she's supposed to be chaos. No, don't be so facile. That's so simplistic. Why do we play those games? But yet at the same time, recognize that there are patterns in the world. But every human being is an instantiation and in alignment with some patterns and in resistance to other patterns. Is it normal for someone to be my size? I'm above normal in height. Is it normal for a Dutchman to be my size? More normal, because the Dutch are taller. Is it good that I'm this tall? I probably won't live as long because I'm tall, because tall people don't live as long as shorter people. And I'm sure there's biological reasons for that. Is it good to be tall? Most of the time, I was on this trip to Salt Lake City. I was with two other pastors. Pastors tend to be taller. Why do pastors tend to be taller? Because generally speaking, people associate authority and competence with height. Is that smart? People do it. So Dutchmen are taller than most. Pastors are taller than most. So guess what? CRC pastors tend to be tall. And so when I go to meetings, I'm there with pastors. We're a pretty tall group. How has our height factored into our vocation? It's been a factor. Sure it has. So then we're all three Dutchmen in a car together, three pastors, CRC pastors, two of them retired, one not retired, although they thought I was because I look old and gray and have a big beard. And we started talking about height. One of them said, it's good to be tall. He was almost as tall as me. I said, yeah, it's most of the time it's good, but it's not good on an airplane. Oh, we all agreed about that because there we sit all scrunched on airplanes. And one said, yeah, United is the worst because their seats are closest. So Is Putin good? Good at what? Good at invading Ukraine? Apparently not. Good at being dictator? He's kind of grown into being a dictator over the last 22 years. Good at killing people? Good at controlling people? Yeah. Is he good? What do you mean? We have more words than one. So, Trembling
Hey,
Inferno.
Paul?
Yeah.
Paul, would you say that your idea of lending agency is that something you learned from your father to lend agency? So when you say the agent is fem or is masculine, I'm just wondering about that.
I don't want to say agency is masculine because that's pushing it too far. It's sort of a mapping and association of masculinity and agency. In some ways, I learned, lending agency from my father, but in some ways, I learned it from my mother. My mother did a lot more parenting than my father. But when I parent, and as I parented, sometimes things from my mother came out and sometimes things from my father came out. So I am one of 3 children. I am the middle child. My older sister, in some ways, is a lot like my father in that she's very high in openness, even higher than I am. She's very artistic. She's lower in conscientiousness. She's higher in negative emotion. I haven't seen her take a test, but I know her pretty well because I've known her my whole life long. And so she, in some ways, is sort of a mapping on my father. And then I'm in the middle. And then my younger sister, the one who passed away, she was a lot like my mother. And I've always kind of been in between my father and my mother. And bugged my sisters to no end when my mother would say things like, Paul kind of got the best of both of us. And my sisters are like, hey, wait a minute. But so I've got a lot of, there's some ways that I'm like my father, but I've got more of my mother in me, and that comes out in my ministry too. So I take less crap from people than my father would. And I'm a little sharper tongued. And so is that a good thing? Sometimes not. There was one point in my ministry when I told someone exactly what I thought, and it did some damage. If I had been more like my father then, would it have been better? Perhaps. It's really hard to know. So, yeah, it's when it comes down to application, we use these mappings to try to understand, but real life is always way, way, way more complex. So it's just difficult. Okay. A few years ago, the YouTube channel, oh yeah, I know that channel. I don't know if I can pronounce it. Kurgs, I don't know how to pronounce it. Made a video in which they claim that their philosophy is optimistic nihilism. Nothing, incoming nothing. There's not so anything as wonderful as nil. There's a little impromptu song for you. Optimistic nihilism. Can't wait to no longer exist. We're looking forward to that. After watching it, I couldn't help but feel that it is an evil, not simply wrong philosophy. But I can't articulate why. It's basically nihilism. That's right. It's like, this is kind tyranny. I think kind is a good thing. Kind tyranny? Is that a good thing? Ooh. Just putting 2 words together that sort of don't quite fit might sometimes illuminate things, but it might sort of cover things up. It's basically nihilism, but everything will be okay because all bad things will be forgotten. Yeah. Did I really press? Did I really do that awful evil deed? I don't remember. Have a lovely day. I think naturalism is worse, but not evil. What makes nihilism so much worse? Because Christianity says that being is good. And so, there was, when I was talking to Vervaeke, when I was watching, eventually, when I watched Peterson, and I basically came to the position that a lot of what's beneath Peterson's philosophy is a declaration that being is good. Why do you have babies? Because being is good. Doesn't mean your baby will be good. Doesn't mean they'll have a happy life. But being is good. Is being neutral? If it's merely neutral, see, so naturalism would say being is neutral. Nihilism, or a promotion of nihilism, however optimistic, almost says that being isn't good. And I think that's where you get the evil valence. So, why is there something rather than nothing? Because God is good. And there's a link to the YouTube. I'll have to look at it later. OBD, I got to keep my eye on the time because Rick has a job to do. I don't know if I'm going to get through all these. Since you have taken on the role of curator and commentator on the Petersonian movement, I guess I have, you end up either explaining or criticizing other ideas and opinions, but your own position is somewhat unknown. I can have thousands of hours of video and you don't know what I think. I feel so feminine. So what are your own ideas about things like what the meaning crisis is and what could solve it? I think the meaning crisis is rejecting the meaning that God has revealed to us through his word and the Christian faith. Seems the most obvious thing of all of it, I believe. Maybe I'm a man of mystery, a man of feminine mystery. My beard is so mysteriously feminine. I'm going to be the bearded lady, all 6'4", 240 pounds of me. Oh gosh, I should not do this thing because Pacau and Chad the alcoholic are going to have way too much fun with me this morning. Yeah. If it is possible to reach a Christian faith through the functional method of Peterson, the Christian faith is a gift. It is given to us by God through the gift of his son, Jesus Christ. I'm a very plain Christian. I can clothe it in all sorts of fancy terms, but that's who I am. That's what I believe. His ideas about collective narratives that are useful for society condensed into archetypal hero martyr, I strongly doubt it, but maybe there's some way to find a similar cultural narrative connected to a different archetype, such as the innocent child, where faith instead of sacrifice is central. And where do you think people like Jordan Peterson, Jonathan Peugeot, and John Vervaeke are wrong? I think I've critiqued them all quite a bit over the years. I've probably, of the three, critiqued Peterson probably the most, but partly just because I've treated him the most. And remaining a Protestant Christian inherently critiques orthodoxy, because that's complex because this is all complex. In a sense, the answer is me. It's my instantiation. It's my decisions. It's my continuing to do what I do. I am the answer to your question. Well, what is Paul Vanderklay? Well, here he is. And part of the reason we do the question and answer is you can ask me almost anything. I'd say anything is a big thing, but almost anything. and I'll tell you what I think. So it's a good question. There is just such an example. My main question is just, where are you standing? I'm actually sitting right now in regards to the question of the Petersonian movement that you find most important. I think it's a movement of God in the world. I think Jordan Peterson is the unauthorized exorcist. I think Jordan Peterson is exorcising demons that are oppressing men and women in our culture, and he is setting them free. Now he's cleaning out the house, and someone's going to live in that house. Dylan is right. You're going to serve someone. It may be the devil, it may be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody. So Peterson cleans out the house, and you better have good spirits fill it. Or I'll tell you what happens if you get an empty, I've seen this many times, if you get an empty structure, when you've got bands of homeless people around, it will be filled. If I leave a shed unlocked, I'll have a tenant, invariably. When the weather gets bad, mice come into the church. Vacuums invite fillings. And so Peterson is coming through as an exorcist, and he is exorcising spirits from people. Invite the Holy Spirit in, and all of the other spirits that come with. So that's what I'm about. And I know when Grim Grizz is underappreciated. He really is. Now he's a little Leviathan in Grim Grizz. He can be a bit much to handle for sometimes for some people, but he asked me, what am I doing with all this stuff? Are you being an evangelist? Yeah. Well, we thought evangelists tried to twist people's arms and coerce them into being Christian Reformed. I'd love you to become Christian Reformed. I don't know that would be the right thing for you. I want you to follow Jesus, and I want Jesus to place you in his church and to use you in service of his kingdom. I'm a Christian minister. This is what I do, and I'm doing it through this way. And now, being a Christian minister also means that I'm going to love you. And you might say, well, I'm not a Christian. I don't believe it. Okay. I'll still love you. Well, I think Jordan Peterson is custodian of the patriarchy, and he's setting back the agenda for women, and okay, I'll still love you. I mean, my goal is to love my neighbor all the way up to and including my enemy. Well, where do I get that goal? I get that goal from Jesus. He's my master. And he says, Paul, you go love your neighbor all the way up to and including your enemy. I said, well, some of these people are hard to love. He says, yeah, I know. Some of them put me on the cross, but they haven't done that to you yet. So what's your excuse? So yeah, that's who I am. And so then why do I do what I do? Why? I had that conversation with Rod Dreher. I'm not even going to get beyond this question. Maybe we'll just have to mark this next question. Add reaction. I'll put my little head there because we got to let Rick do his day job. So I watched what Rod Dreher was doing on his blog, and I was impressed because as I said on that conversation I did with him and Kale, he should retitle his blog, read the whole thing. Because what Rod Dreher helped me with was he's sort of like a Reader's Digest for me. There's so much good stuff out there. How do you know what to watch? How do you know what to read? How do you know what's good? And so what Rod Dreher did was he read a lot of things and he would write blog posts on it. And, I don't always agree with Rod Dreher. That's normal. no two people always agree on everything. And the more they know each other, the less they agree, or the longer the list of disagreements is, just because the whole list is even longer. So, and I thought, I wonder if you could do this on video. And that was just in the back of my mind for a while. And then I saw, my kids are in a whole world that I'm not. And I said, people really watch other people play video games on the internet? I mean, they're not playing it. They're watching other people play. What's with that? I don't know, but they do. And they do it a lot. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Then Peterson comes along, and I'm trying to talk about Peterson because, he's exercising little things in me. And it's like, oh, this is interesting. And then I thought, and then of course we had I thought there's a lot of lonely people out there. I know that as a pastor. And I thought a lot of people are watching Peterson alone. I wonder if they want someone to watch Peterson with them. I bet you they do. I wonder how I could do that. I bet you I could do that on YouTube. Kind of like people watch other people play video games. And I'll just kind of let you know. And what do you do when you watch something together? Like Sunday afternoon, I'm going to have my kids over and we're going to watch The Bachelor. Oh, gosh. ABC tortures young, beautiful people for money and profit. And we sit around and we talk about the show and we talk about stuff. It's just a forum for engagement. And so I thought, I'll do that with Peterson because it's interesting to me. And then y'all started talking back. Oh, now it's even more fun. And then I got to get to know you, and I got to know Rick, and I got to know Joey, and I got to know Job, and I got to know Sherry, and I got to know on and on and on and on and on and on. It gets more and more and more and more fun. And then, maybe this summer I'll get to meet Sam and Hank and Bernie and people in Grand Rapids, and this is more and more fun. But at the core, what do I want for you? I want you to have the same joy I do. Well, what joy is that? That's knowing Christ and believing that Jesus is Lord and he's risen from the dead and he reigns on high. Watch my Sunday school class. What's the gospel? What's Paul talk about in Acts 13? Jesus raised from the dead. Jesus is the Messiah, not just of Israel, but the whole world. And Jesus is Lord of history. And he's bringing history to a glorious conclusion. And we will reign with him. And he will be unveiled in us. And there's more chapters besides just this age. And if you think this age is fun, wait till you see what he has for you in the next. Don't you want to come with me? Don't you want to be a part of that? Don't you want don't you want the great storyteller to write a great story with your life? There's no better thing. That's what I want for you. Now you might say, I don't believe any of that stuff. Okay. I'm a Calvinist. I can't make you believe it. But I'll still love you and I'll still be your friend and I still want this for you. You might not want it for yourself. Well, you and God will talk about that at some day. But that's what I'm about. That's what I believe. That's what I'm doing here. Now you might say, well, are you or aren't you an evangelist? Well, it depends what you mean. If you think an evangelist doesn't love you, marching orders still stand. All right. It is 12:45. Rick has to go, so I have to go. Thank you for watching, and leave a comment. You can end transmission.